we have a guest with us that we've never had on before. Dr. William Workman joins us on the UMA guest line as we wanted to get some information on Brock Purdy and the turf toe. And it's like, I can fly blind for only so long before I have to go get educated. And Dr. Workman is a board certified orthopedic surgeon. He's a sports medicine expert. He undergrad at Tulane. Also did, he went to med school at Tulane, I should say, then also did stuff at Yale and Harvard, and now has a practice in the East Bay. He's an ex-pro baseball player, played baseball for Cal and Bob Milano with D. Lou and Jeff Kent and the boys when they went to the College World Series. He's pitched in the Angels organization, or went to the Angels organization, and then went to med school, and he's with us on the UMA guest line to maybe make a little sense of turf toe. Dr. Workman, thank you very much for your time.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Well, as you know, I mean, Brock Purdy's got the turf toe situation. At first, they were kind of hesitant to call it turf toe. So why don't we start there? What is the designation? What makes a toe injury as opposed to a turf toe injury?
Yeah. Well, turf toe, as we're learning, is a pretty severe injury a lot of times, and it definitely is a departure from just a simple, toe injury. And I think it has sort of a lightened connotation, if you will. Turf toe sounds like a stub toe, or like, come on, man, it's just your toe. But it's a pretty severe injury, and it's a very specific injury.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. It's an injury to the connective tissue, right, between the foot and the toe, and one of the joints in the ball of the foot. And when the big toe is involved, that's typically known as turf toe, correct?
Yeah. So it's always going to be the big toe, and we don't really think about our big toe until it's hurt. But it's a major point of departure for the foot pushing off of the ground when we're even walking, but let alone trying to run away from linebackers. And anytime we're trying to push off, jump, run, sprint, we're going right through that big toe. And it's the bottom of that big toe. As we push off, we call that extension. The big toe is extending, which means that the toe is sort of bending towards the head, if you will, as we're pushing off. And on the underside of that toe, that connective tissue that you mentioned, there's tendons and there's a capsule that holds the joint together. And if that toe bends too much, it gets caught in the turf or hyperextends, it can rupture, it can tear that connective tissue, that capsule, potentially the tendon, and it renders the joint unstable, let alone very painful.
This is not a territory that you're not familiar with. This is a territory you're very familiar with, I would imagine. You also were a team physician and traveled with the New England Patriots. So when you first heard about this injury, I guess what goes through your mind? And Brock, obviously, the initial prognosis was 2 to 6 weeks. Yeah. He took 2 weeks off, came back and played one game, and immediately exacerbated it and made it worse to the point where obviously it sounds like maybe a setback.
Well, and I don't know the specifics of the injury. Sure. I'm not the one treating him, but I'm, as soon as I hear that diagnosis, to your question, that's it. I'm very concerned because, again, it doesn't sound like much. Turf toe, it's just a toe, but it can very quickly, 2 to 6 weeks is a very reasonable initial assessment. And we grade these injuries in severity, and there's sort of a 3-grade scale, 1, 2, and 3. And we treat them differently based on the grade. So it essentially is the amount of tearing that happens. You can have a little bit of tearing, a little bit more, or complete tearing. And the lower grade ones can respond pretty well to rest. The problem is if you don't rest them enough, they don't heal. And you go back too early, and it can turn into a bigger injury. And that may have been what happened here. It was a low-grade injury. Probably he was feeling better, and he certainly is a gamer, so he's going to probably, not complain too much when he's examined and like, let's get out there and try it. And it doesn't go so well. And there's only so much, and we can talk about it, there's only so much protection you can do for it that keeps a person playing without inhibiting performance.
And the rest aspect of it, I mean, okay, so let's just say, you have a client or a patient, let's say, that has this injury, and they rest, and you say, hey, rest it for 6 weeks, and then they rest for 6 weeks. what will you know when you look at that toe again? Does it have to be, do you have to do a x-ray? Do you have to look at imaging, or can you just feel around and ask the patient about pain tolerance? How do you then test it to see that it's healed properly and sufficiently?
Yeah, these are good questions, Larry. So the rest, we have to be clear, that includes immobilization. That's a very important component of it. You need to put the toe in a position where it doesn't extend, right? That's the rest. If you extend it, you're stretching that tissue that's trying to heal, and everything goes to crud. So it's usually a boot, or at least a very stiff-soled shoe. We can put like a carbon fiber insert into the shoe so they can't extend their toe. And if we were to say rest for 6 weeks, the way we would test it is just manually, just simply pressing on the area, moving the toe around. That's probably the most sensitive indicator. Imaging at that point, an MRI would be the most sophisticated imaging. It's still a little bit early to call it complete healing, because there's going to be some residual signal, we call it, residual edema maybe that's still there that doesn't allow us to conclusively say that it's healed. So we can't rely on imaging that early on. So it's more a clinical evaluation. It's a judgment. It's a feel. It's a give and take with the player on what their symptoms are and what our tactile exam is of the structure.
So, okay, so you do a kind of a manual test, and you see, and obviously you're a former athlete, you know that there's different pain tolerance levels. Every athlete's a little different. If, there's kind of this macho thing in the NFL, shoot it up and play with it. What would be the downside of doing that? If you made him pain-free for the moment, and he played with turf toe but didn't feel that pain because of the pain medicines that were given to him, what's the risk for the patient long term?
Yeah, I mean, in this case, the pain is a very helpful indicator of the state of the structure. And if he's not feeling the pain, it's very easy for him to exacerbate the injury, make it worse, which would turn it into possibly a season-ending injury instead of losing one more game. It definitely would be something I can't imagine they would do for this type of injury.
Is there a surgical solution to this, or is the only solution extended rest?
Well, it depends on the grade. We talked about the grade from 1, 2, and 3. And 3, the most severe grade is almost always surgical, because you need to reapproximate that tissue to give it a chance to heal. But it doesn't, doing surgery for the lesser grades doesn't speed up the healing time. So there's no advantage to fixing them, because even when you fix them, you still have to immobilize them and let that tissue heal. It's all about keeping that tissue together, immobilizing it, giving it a chance to enough time to heal. And that, again, that window of 2 to 6 weeks really depends on the severity. If it's a very minor, just a little bit of tissue tearing, 2 weeks might be enough, but it's almost always going to be 6 weeks minimum in my mind. I mean, it's an injury you can't really mess around with.
All right, a little break from the content to tell you about our friends over at Sleeper. This 49er football season is presented on the Krug Show by Sleeper, the fastest growing fantasy platform in the world. It's a one-stop shop. You get blazing fast news, real-time stats, group chat, season-long leagues, and of course, Sleeper picks for daily fantasy. Use promo code Larry, Larry, and Sleeper will match your first deposit up to $100. Links in the description. Terms and conditions do apply. If you're the kind, it's a football season. He played a week. It got worse. He's then sat. Can you make this a long-term or a chronic injury by coming back and trying to play on it before it's sufficiently rested?
Absolutely. Yeah, if you think about it, it's like a lot of other things. You have this tissue that's torn, and the immediate inflammatory healing response for the acute injury is the best time for it to heal. And if you let that happen part way and then you go back and tear it again, then you have some tissue that's sort of healed. You have some new tearing tissue. It's kind of a disorganized healing response from that point on. You still might be able to get away with just going back and giving it extended rest. But if you kind of repeat that process 1, 2, or 3 times, you may get into a situation where that tissue becomes sort of garbage and doesn't want to heal. And those are the chronic turf toe. And, there are cases of those where just guys had to end their career because of it.
One of the things that I've noticed, and obviously I'm not a doctor, I'm just a person who's an interested observer, but I have been able to watch practice. And when since the injury, Brock seems like he's sailing some of his passes high, almost like, hey, he's a little tentative about driving that ball of the foot and toe into the ground. And so he's putting it down softer, which is changing the mechanics of the throw and the release point. And a lot of his balls, at least that I've seen him practice and in the one game against Jacksonville, are sailing high. Does that make sense to you?
Oh, 100%. I mean, if you think about throwing a football, which I'm not as much of an expert in as I was. Well, I'm never an expert at throwing a baseball either, but I have more experience with that. But, posting up on that front side is really going through the ball of your foot if you think about that. And sailing high makes perfect sense because he just can't get to the front of his foot. He's going to be back off of the front of his foot. He's not going to want to put pressure forward. So the pressure backward is going to keep his momentum a little bit higher. It's going to sail higher for sure.
Is there anything that could be done, whether it's done in the States or elsewhere? You see some athletes go to Germany and they get platelet-rich injections, and it's all intended to speed up recovery and get them back onto the field faster. Is there any methods that are being utilized elsewhere, and even outside of this country, that speed this injury rehabilitation up in any way?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and there are a lot of different preparations, but ultimately all of them are limited by human physiology and what nature does as far as healing, and all of these treatments are to enhance the normal healing process. And if there is any question about a deficiency in the normal healing process, then it would make sense to do something like that. But if all the expectation is that it's the normal healing process, it's not going to really add anything, because once you put that stuff in there, you still got to give the tissue a chance to heal. So, for example, his case where they were going to give it 2 weeks, any sort of, blood preparation, all those stuff you've heard about going to Germany or PRP or all that, it takes time for that to work. And if it's only a 2-week window, it's not going to shorten it to 1 week.
Very interesting.
But if he gets in a situation where it gets to be a bit difficult healing, absolutely that will come into play.
And what is the recommendation for the downtime? Let's just say it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks. Is the recommendation that you lay in a bed for 6 weeks, or is the expectation that you walk around? Because we've seen him practice, and it's like there's a big distinction in the NFL between game day and practice.
Yeah.
But for this injury, practice may be as bad as game day. I don't know. How do you see it?
Well, I mean, again, I don't get to watch them practice. I don't know, but that toe needs to be immobilized, and there is a way to do that and still allow them to move around. But it's essentially the foot cannot flex. So you're either going to be in a boot or you're going to be in a carbon fiber or steel plated insole, so that when you step, the toe can't extend. And it's possible for him to be in something like that and be out on the field, and that's probably why you're seeing him sail the passes high, because he can't push off of his front foot. And as long as he's not extending, he's probably okay.
George Kittle suggested, and George is not a doctor either, but George said, hey, I hope he waits and really gives it time, and when he feels great, come back, but not before that. Is there an amount of time, you've been covering this injury for a long time, is there an amount of time that you think is kind of, in a safe territory where absolutely you're healed by that point? Or is it literally case by case, and some people can heal in 3 weeks and some people don't heal for 40 weeks?
Yeah. I mean, again, it depends on the severity of injury, based on the grading scale. That's going to influence the time. And I don't know which grade his is. But I think it's very difficult in season to get to the point where you can say this is 100% and we have no doubt that everything's going to be great. But I would say within the framework of the season that it's a minimum of 6 to 8 weeks.
And that 6 to 8 weeks of doing nothing, basically.
6 to 8 weeks of not extending that toe.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen a football player or a quarterback who had this injury that tried to recover in season?
Not that I can think of. Not a quarterback. Not off the top of my head. No.
Okay.
But I would just say when I heard about that happening, it's like, that's going to be touch and go for this season for sure.
Yeah. And it's such a tough thing because the dynamics behind this season. Brock Purdy signed a big contract. He's trying to justify and show everybody that he can lead the team, and it's a toe injury, and it sounds so benign and so nothing, and get out there, tough it out. But as you're pointing out in this interview, that's the worst plan of attack, and it sounds like the Niners and Brock are just going to have to really demonstrate some patience with this thing.
Yeah, and I love Purdy for that, and guys like him that are tough and want to tough things out, and there are some things you can bully, some injuries you can bully that way, but unfortunately this is not one of them, and that's why you hear about it being such a nasty one with such a benign sounding name.
Yep. No, I know it's a absolute. I feel for him. Yeah, it's a tough one for him because how bad he wants to be out there. How bad he would endure the pain if it wasn't going to be a long-term, not in his best interest. But that sounds like exactly what it is. It's not about can he endure the pain or can he shoot it up. It's going to be in his long-term best interest to let that thing heal properly. Would you agree?
100%.
Pretty much. Yeah,
100%.
Dr. Workman, thank you very much for jumping on KMBR and giving us your time and your expertise. We really appreciate you.
Oh, thanks for having me. This was great. Thank you, Larry.
Yeah, Dr. William B. Workman has practices in Walnut Creek. He's a board-certified orthopedic surgeon, and I hope you guys enjoyed some of the breakdown that he gave us right there.